Welcome to Cool Explorations.
In North America, we have a tendency to want to help out the world. This, in and of itself, is a great and wonderful thing, as there are many less well off countries. The question presented then is one I have heard a lot lately. Since the economic downturn in Western Canada, is Canada helping other countries at the cost of our own citizens? This is what we will be looking at in this article. It is a complicated and tough subject. Let us see what the facts tell us, and then you can let me know in the comments what you think. First, we can take a look at the foreign aid facts and stats, then a couple of places where the funds could go if they were kept at home. After looking at both options, you can then decide which option you think is best. In the 1950s, Canada started to realize that foreign aid was a necessary part of the cog of being in a global community. Thus began the foreign aid funding and helping out many developing countries over the years. The percentage of the federal budget spent on foreign aid each year varies somewhat based upon tragic events across the globe, such as the hurricane that hit Haiti. According to Canada's foreign aid facts, in 2012, the budget for foreign aid was $5.67 billion, which worked out to 2.5% of the overall budget. And in 2014, it was $4.9 billion, which, if we fast forward to 2018, we see a budget of $6.1 billion, which is an increase of 8.9% from the $5.6 billion in 2017, according to the Canadian International Development Platform. The amount of money spent each year seems to be climbing, but where is this money actually going to? If we take a look at the stats from 2018 and break it down, we find that 33.8% went to some of the world's most impoverished countries, 1.8% was provided to low-income countries, and 18.2% can be accounted for lower mid-income places. And the rest has gone to sources that were not based upon the country's income status. If we take a look at this, certain countries consistently receive aid, sadly, some of which ends up being confiscated by corrupt groups or leaders. When this happens, it is often terrorist groups stealing the shipments. The region that received the most money in 2018 was Africa with 38.7%. Then Asia with 31%, South and North America 11.6%, and Europe 2.6%. Afghanistan is the country that is receiving the largest share of foreign aid, with $254 million being received last year. If you want to check out these facts and stats and more, just check out the CIDP site as mentioned above. Now that the numbers are clear, how are these dollars being spent? Foreign aid money goes to a wide variety of areas. Humanitarian aid to assist in times when disaster strikes, then governance and infrastructure, an example of which would be helping countries rebound, rebuild, and form proper governments after war. Refugees and debt relief take a big chunk of foreign aid budgets. Transportation, energy sectors, and the environment fall into another portion of the budget. Education, health services, and sanitation, and then the general population are an essential part of foreign aid efforts. Then setting up economic stability through supporting agriculture, finance, forestry, fishing, trade, and in industry building. They all help countries to fix their financial issues. All of these areas are important around the world, with so many countries struggling to scrape by and recover from disasters and war times. The question then becomes, are we ignoring our own citizens who are in need of these exact same services? Foreign aid money is important, but we do have many areas in our own country that fall into these exact same categories, yet we send the money overseas instead. I would also question why we are sending money overseas in a time of deficit and economic struggle in more than half the country. One area that could benefit from added resources and financing is the Canadian healthcare system, which I won't spend a lot of time on, as much of healthcare spending and funding also comes through the province itself. According to the CIHI, Canadian Institute for Health Information, the 2017 health spending was around $242 billion, which makes the foreign aid budget seem like a drop in the bucket. One could still point out that the extra billions could mean a lot of extra equipment or research funding for hospitals, research centers, and universities, which could ultimately save more Canadian lives or at least extend lifespans over the years of funding adding up. The issue comes when one looks at the huge increase in healthcare spending over the years. Some can be credited to inflation, but certainly not the majority of it. The year 2000 saw a total of around $100 billion spent, while a jump to 2011 sees $200 billion spent, a fairly significant increase in spending, much of this can be attributed to the baby boomer generation starting to become our elderly population, as well as an increase in those being affected by disease and illnesses. The increase in spending makes it seem like this may be a good place to be putting the foreign aid money if it were to be kept at home here in Canada rather than going overseas. The other area that could use extra funding is our housing and homelessness market or area. It seems like it needs to be understood that there is no one clear solution for homelessness and poverty and the housing situation. It takes a wide variety of approaches, and not all of it would be government funded. This is a subject that is growing in importance for the country as a whole, but especially Western Canada, with the sabotage of our economy. Homelessness strikes many various demographics of Canadians. Let us look at some of the numbers according to the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness. 35,000 Canadians are homeless on average per night. More than 235,000 Canadians will experience homelessness each year. Of these groups, 27.3% will be women and 18.7% will be youth. Veterans tend to be hit hard by this due to the lack of government support programs and all the budget cuts and everything that Trudeau has made and has told them that they are asking for just too much. They really do need the support. They need the funding. And the mental and physical trauma that they have experienced needs to be addressed, and it should be addressed by our country as a whole. They shouldn't have to be trying to figure that out on themselves and end up going homeless as a result because they don't have that support. In total, approximately 2,950 veterans will experience homelessness per year. The elderly is another group that gets hit hard by this. The number seems to be growing each year. Approximately 24.4% of people coming to shelters will be 50 and over. Families tend to stay in shelters almost twice as long as other shelter users due to trying to keep their children safe. Although our country is made up of only 4.3% of Indigenous people, they are over proportionately represented in these shelters with 28 to 34%. A sad and startling number. Poverty tends to cost Canadians billions of dollars each year. Raising the roof paints a picture of some of these costs in 2017. Homelessness partnering strategy expansion cost $2.1 billion. $41 million was used by CMHC to better their data collection and their analytics program. And $11.2 billion over an 11-year period that was and is currently going to the new National Housing Strategy. The National Housing Strategy funds and researches initiatives that prevent homelessness, and they support the construction and renovation to affordable housing in Canada. Starting in 2017, $39.9 million over the course of 5 years, and after that, $6.6 million per year afterwards is supposed to be used. This will go to Stats Canada for new housing statistics frameworks. Next, there is the $3.2 billion that is being invested in helping provinces and territories build and maintain affordable housing and rent programming. Extra federal land and buildings are now being made available to housing providers in the form of a $202 million investment. Another way that these budget funding are decided by is looking at the populations that are the most vulnerable. So some of what we were looking at before. And then Northern and Inuit communities struggle with housing, as it is so expensive for everything up there, as you're well aware. $300 million investment was made towards their group. Indigenous people living off of reserve often also face challenges with housing. So a $225 million investment was made to help housing providers who serve these groups of people. Since the start of the attacks on Western economics, poverty is a growing trend in Western Canada. According to Canada Without Poverty, 1 in 7 in Canada will live in poverty, but in Edmonton, that stat now is 1 in 8. Fear of job loss and fears of job cutbacks has increased by more than 50% over the past few years. Who is most likely to fall victim to poverty? Those with disabilities are more than twice as likely. Nearly 45% of the homeless population consists of those who have mental or physical disabilities. Children are also twice as likely to land in this category. They're living in homes that have social assistance. Canada has 1.3 million children currently living in poverty, 1 in 5 or 1 in 2 if they are status First Nations. More than 1/3 of our people who show up at the food banks in Canada will be children, and 1 in 7 shelter users will be children. Inuit and Indigenous groups fall into this category as well. According to the people who live on the reserves, this has a lot to do with tribal leaders and chiefs misappropriating funds to line their own pockets instead of helping people that they're placed in leadership to guide and to help. With single mothers, 21% of single mothers will live in poverty compared to 7% of single fathers. And as mentioned previously, our elderly are more likely to fall into poverty as well. So 15% of single elders live in poverty. UNICEF has given Canada a rating of 17th out of the 29 wealthiest countries with children living in poverty. And Canada was ranked 26th out of 35 for child inequality. This is a lot of information. I know we've gone over quite a bit in quite a short amount of time, and a lot of the numbers you'll just have to mull over and think about. If foreign aid money was to be used on our own Canadians, it could make a difference in the country's homelessness and poverty problem. If it was to go anywhere, that would be where I myself would be recommending it go. It could provide additional funding for our veterans, Indigenous communities, our homeless shelters, food banks, soup kitchens, poverty support, Inuit communities, and health initiatives. However, this would come at the cost of communities around the world not receiving help that they need. I only caution that if we are to use foreign aid, then more thought is needed as to where it goes. Aid should not be going to countries where terrorists will benefit from the assistance being given. I will let you make the call as to what you think should be done with the foreign aid money now that you have the information you need. Remember to let me know in the comments section what you think should be the result. Yes or no? Should we be keeping foreign aid money in Canada? And tell me why.
Remember to like and subscribe.